We believe health is the foundation that unlocks freedom. The freedom to live fully, to be an asset and not a burden, and to chase what truly matters. Through daily practices and proven frameworks, we are here to help you build deep health, find lasting peace, and live with your heart on fire. Welcome to the chase. Hello, welcome back to the show. Here as always with Ben, joined this time around by friend of the show, Marcus Wilson. Marcus is the co-founder of NOBULL. Marcus, I looked it up. The last time we had you on the show was July of 2019, and I don't know why it's taken us so long to have you back, but welcome.
Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And it's fun to be on the show with you guys because I do listen to the podcast all the time. So I'm excited to participate in it again.
Glad we dragged you into this side of the production. We are going to talk about, so Ben just happened to bring up the fact that you guys were chatting and hanging out and I think working out together at least once a week. I don't know. You guys can tell me how frequently you see each other at this point. But he was telling me you guys were hanging out and you guys were having some cool conversations, specifically conversations around discipline. And I thought, let's do that. Let's have a conversation with Marcus around discipline. And that's what we're going to do today. Specifically, I've had this idea, and I had the idea a couple months ago of a quote unquote disciplined diet. Better said, I had the idea of putting myself on a disciplined diet. And I had this idea around January, February, because I really felt like I was floundering a little bit. I felt like I was all unmoored and I didn't really know where to focus or what I was focused on. And so I just had this concept and I jotted it down. I played with some ideas, but it hasn't really gone too much further than just that idea of putting yourself on a disciplined diet. And so when Ben told me you guys were hanging out and that you were really interested in and thinking about, or you think about discipline a lot, Marcus, I thought, okay, let's use this as an excuse to flesh out this idea of a disciplined diet. Cool?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to give a little context as to what I mean by a disciplined diet. I'm going to give you a working definition. We're going to talk about discipline, and then we're just going to have some fun with this conversation. So here's a working definition that we have that I'd love to play with throughout the conversation here. A disciplined diet is a deliberate, structured approach to building self-discipline by consciously selecting and practicing actions, habits, and challenges that promote growth and character, while limiting behaviors that undermine progress or foster comfort seeking. It is about feeding yourself the right kinds of challenges and routines in the right amounts with the intention of developing inner strength and resilience, much like a healthy food diet builds physical health. So that is the working definition that we've got for a disciplined diet. Before we get into it, Marcus, I would love high-level thoughts around discipline, how you think about discipline, how discipline shows up in your life. And let's start there.
Well, for me, one, I just love talking about this. And so one of the things that Ben and I get together fairly regularly now, and part of that is around, one of the things I think a lot about is who do I want to be, right? And there's a Epictetus quote that I love, which is first decide who you will be, then do what you must, something along those lines. But that comes down to not only the discipline, and I've applied that certainly physically. Historically for me, it's been very easy to figure that out physically because there's such clear protocols around if you want to run faster, jump higher, be better, physically fitter, bigger muscles, here's what you do. But on the mental and emotional side, that's been something that has been a little bit more challenging for me to figure out. So mentally, the thing that I've gravitated to is around the discipline, building willpower is like intentionally doing hard things to develop that skill, kind of like you would with muscles. But then there's also the emotional side, which is really, really challenging to figure out. And so I've kind of come to this place that it's like, I think of it more as like soil. You can plant seeds, you can water it, you can do the things that you need to do, but you can't make things grow. And so within that context, it's actually one of the reasons Ben and I get together, and it's such an important thing for me to spend time with people who make me better. People who I want to spend time with because it helps me become the person I want to be. And so for me, Ben's one of those people. And so when we get together, whether it's talking about physical training, any of those things, it helps me become a better person. And so we've started to And Ben, I'm very curious if you've kind of had the same experience. Like over the years, we've talked a lot more about training, but now we talk about other things. We talk about the discipline side. We talk about what it means to be mentally better, emotionally better. And relationships for me are a part of that fertile soil. And so leaning into that is something that's been really, really great. Like I went to CT&E yesterday. We're recording this the day after Memorial Day. And I was on a plane on Sunday and thinking about how great it would be to go do Murph at CT&E. So I sent Ben, and I was on the fence a little bit. I'm like, I don't know what time I'm going to land, all these things. And so, but I had enough discipline in the moment, and Ben and I talked about this yesterday, to send him the text saying, are you going to be at CT&E? Thinking about dropping in. And I knew that if once I sent that text, if Ben responded, then I would have to go. Right. And so it was just like that momentary discipline to push me to go there. And so a lot of the thoughts that I've been having around discipline is like, I've used to have this perspective of discipline was this thing that you've got to have at all times. And I've started to come to this appreciation, understanding that there's moments of discipline. If you make a really good choice in a moment, it makes it easier down the road. If you're at the grocery store and walking down an aisle and you see Cheetos, having the discipline to not put those in your basket. And then you don't have to deal with it at home because it's just not there. And so there's some of these things that have just been really, I've started to appreciate around the subtle moments where you can be disciplined that make it a lot easier more broadly.
It's so good that I think that that idea of all you need is just enough, right? You don't need it. It's not like I am a forever and always and 24/7 and I'm super regimented and disciplined. It's just the few small decisions at the right time, right?
Absolutely.
That's what I think. When Marcus says being intentional to do the hard things, you're kind of. We talked about this yesterday, but that text he sent while on the plane was like, all I need is enough discipline, courage, bravery, conviction, intention, action to send a text. And the future self doesn't need to be able to say whether to do Murph or not, because the future self might be so tired from the plane ride. So you're kind of like doing these little actions now that are setting yourself up down the road to make the bigger ones. The Cheetos in the shopping aisles are such a great example because all you need is a little bit then. Just a little bit then. You don't even necessarily want the Cheetos right then. You're just kind of getting for maybe later on I'll want them. It's an easier decision when you're shopping, as long as you follow the first rule of shopping, which is never go grocery shopping when you're hungry. If you do that, then you don't have to deal with things later on. You're setting. I think a big part of discipline that people miss is this act of like setting yourself up for success. Putting your running shoes out the night before.
Absolutely.
Like surrounding yourself with, which I love that Marcus kind of started the conversation off with that, surrounding yourself with the right people. So Marcus and I have been getting together. We get together, pretty close to every, once a week. And we spend, it's been Fridays. We spend 4 or 5 hours together Friday mornings. We'll work out, then we'll chat. And what I think is really cool is this idea that, we talked about this a little bit as well, about myself being a lot more intentional of surrounding myself with strong, like-minded men, which I think is, again, something that if we're not intentional with, and I don't mean that in terms of like try to push out the women out of our lives, but I'm married to my wife, and I work with my wife, and I train with my wife. I think that what the thing that's missing for me, a big part of it was this friendship component, this peer-to-peer. And I'm lucky enough too with Marcus plays a few different roles for me, friend, but also he's farther along professionally than I am. So he also plays this mentor role for me as well. So I think we have this kind of nice symbiotic where I can kind of play the trainer role for him a little bit, and he plays the business mentor role for me. And then we get this opportunity to work on, the spiritual, emotional, and the mental together. And we talk a lot about stuff that has nothing to do with business or training.
Yeah.
Usually the first, if we're together for 4 or 5 hours, it'll be an hour and a half of training. That's an hour and a half of chatting, just shooting it, like whatever's going on in our lives. And then, the last hour or so will be business related or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and this isn't necessarily on the discipline side, but to Ben's point, with men, it's like we spend so much of our time focused on family, career, and then there's this whole concept around needing to be strong and tough and all of these things. But the thing that you don't really hear about, or so many men, from my perspective, are reluctant to be as vulnerable with each other. And so it's one of these things where I've got, a handful of really close friends who I can just be myself. I don't need to worry about kind of what thoughts, or perceptions they may have of me, because they know me. And if I've got times where I'm struggling with something, just sharing that. And what I found way more often than not is everybody's struggling with something. Everybody is struggling with something mentally and emotionally. And this is one of those things where it's like, again, I don't think that it's, my experience with the physical side of things and what physical strength and physical health is. I've been a lifelong athlete, so that's always been something I've known. But it's the mental and the emotional side, really kind of spending time really reflecting on that. That's where, like, breath work and meditation, and Ben and I have talked quite a bit about this, and a really good friend of ours, Amit, who's taught us both breath work and meditation. And it's been something over the last several years, and I started a real meaningful practice actually back in 2019. I think the last time I was on this podcast is where I really got into it. And it's been one of the most consistent things I've done over the last 6 years or so. And it's really helped me kind of get in touch with myself, understand emotions and thoughts, and not be so reactive to those. And also helped me become much more comfortable being vulnerable, because it also is like it's mattering less and less. My goal is for it to not matter at all what anyone else thinks about me. And that's a lofty goal, but I'm better this year than I was last year, and I'm not as good as I will be next year. And so these are the things that I kind of keep working on and paying attention to, and trying to put those things into practice in my life, and putting those things out into the world.
When you say a breath work and a meditation practice, just share with us what that looks like. Because this is, if we're talking about discipline, you've been doing that regularly as anything else you've done for the last 6 years. That's a lot. What does that practice look like?
Yeah, so I guess where it all started was me really thinking about, back to the first, decide who you want to be. And one of the things for me is wanting to be someone who is grounded, wanting to be someone who was not controlled by my emotions, that recognized them, appreciated them, and then thoughtfully made decisions around things. But when I first got into breathwork and meditation, it was just about stress management. It was an entrepreneur, in 2019, it was like 4 years after NOBULL had launched, dealing with just all sorts of kind of crazy stress. And what I wanted to be better at was just, when hard things hit me, to be able to not overreact. And so it's one of those things where I was just like, I started this practice of meditation before I met Amit. That was just Headspace. And, I had a year plus where I meditated every single day. I did literally every meditation on Headspace, with the exception of meditations that were for like pregnant women. And and I just was like leaning into it. And then that's when I met Amit, who then kind of opened doors beyond that. And I went from knowing I needed to just calm my mind when stress was around to recognizing there was a bigger unlock there. And so now each morning, I would say probably 5 to 6 days a week in the mornings, I do a kind of a practice that Amit gave me was about a 15 minutes of breath work. So that's just controlled breathing. It starts with literally, inhaling for 6 seconds, holding for 6 seconds, exhaling for 12. And I'll do that for 10 breaths or a few minutes. And then it goes through other things that are around exercises for the diaphragm, other types of breathing that really kind of help you improve the way you breathe, and then also connecting with yourself. And then I end with like a 5-minute meditation where it's just like sitting quietly and kind of processing and letting things go. And sometimes I'll make that a little bit more. Sometimes I'll make it a little bit less. I've started doing more yoga. Yoga used to be for me about mobility, as Ben can absolutely attest to. I have very, very, very little mobility, but I've been working on that. But the thing that yoga now is more about connecting with myself. The mobility piece of it is a byproduct, but really kind of being focused throughout that entire process, and mindfulness has just been really, really good for me.
When you're when you're doing the 12 seconds in, 6 seconds out, and you're doing the 5 minutes of meditation at the end, do you have a timer? Do you have a clock? Mechanically, like how do you do this?
Yeah. So Amit has this really, really awesome site, Breathonance, which that he's launched, that has, it basically sets these breathing exercises to music, and it can be really, really helpful. And sometimes I use that. So it's literally a 3-minute track that you follow along as you're breathing to music. That's great. But also there's probably more often than not, I'll just I'll do 10 breaths, right? And if I'm doing 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, or 6 second hold, 12 seconds out, that's only like 3-ish breaths a minute. So it really forces me to slow down. And then I've learned more about even just physiology around just the physics of why that lowers your heart rate, when your lungs are inflated, the increased pressure on your heart, like all of these things. And so I've come to really appreciate those. And so there are times, more often than not, I'll do things for a set number of breaths. And sometimes with the meditation, I'll typically set a timer, because when I'm really in flow, I kind of lose, track of time. And so it's, I try different things and really go with kind of how I'm feeling in the moment.
And that's Breathonance.
Breathonance.
Yeah, because we said it a couple times. It's Dr. Amit, who's a great guy. He really expanded my practice as well. Super cool stuff. Cool conversation about discipline at large, discipline diet, and I like the idea of, we'll get into about like how that carries over to character development and all the rest. But I think the reason, just to kind of like highlight why this conversation with Marcus.
Yep.
I consider myself pretty disciplined. Marcus is more disciplined than I am. Like Marcus does, to what other people, not people that listen to this show, but what normal people would look at is like, that dude's crazy. And it's all about.
It's only in some areas. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like doing hard things. Like that's the idea, is like, we do hard things not for the sake of hard things. We do hard things because they help me become the person I want to be. And Marcus, you have this really cool thing that I've borrowed and thought a lot about, which is this kind of thought experiment of your 8-year-old and 80-year-old self. Can you kind of tell us about that?
Yeah. So it's one of these things where when I talk about like worrying about what other people think, it's something that my whole life have just kind of, and I think it's pretty common for people to really worry about what other people think, and people who you don't really actually necessarily even care about, but yet their opinions of you seem to matter. And so for me, I've kind of distilled it down to there's really only two people out there who ultimately I really want to make proud. And one is like my teenage self. And then the other is like my 90-year-old self. And those two people, if they're proud of me, then that's something that's all that matters. Like anybody else who matters will have really positive thoughts and feelings and emotions about me. And the reason I choose that is that there's this aspect of my younger self, that I view as looking up to who I am now in a way that I look up to who I hope to be in the future. And when I think about that person, kind of looking back, they're looking back with my goal is for them to be looking back with pride around how hard I'm working and what I'm doing to help them live a better life. And then that person's never going to be satisfied. There's never a point, there's nothing I can achieve right now where my 90-year-old self is going to be like, that's enough. Like, good, great, you're good. Like, you don't need to do anything more. There's always this aspect of me I know that is going to want to keep pushing and wanting to keep becoming better. And so one of the things, there's this Marcus Aurelius quote that really, really has spoken to me for a very long time, which is waste no more time arguing what a good man is, be one. And so for me, that's about action over words. And there's a version I've kind of created of that for myself, which is like waste no more time arguing what better is, be better. And so I've started to kind of define what better is for me along the lines of physical, mental, and emotional. And there's been a lot of really amazing things. Mike Rapoli, who's the co-founder of Vitamin Water, co-founder of Body Armor, and now the majority owner of NOBULL, has helped me kind of unlock some of these things as well, which is I've always led with physical because that's what I've known. But the reality is that whenever I fall off on the physical side, it's because something has happened on the mental or emotional side. And so I've now, and this may also have to do, with age and I hope wisdom, really focusing on what can I do to strengthen the mental and emotional side. And that comes back to what we were talking about with doing hard things and discipline, quite frankly. So my general view is if you want to get better at anything, or if I want to get better at anything, it comes down to three things: discipline, effort, and consistency. Mm-hmm. And of those, it's the consistency is the most important thing. The discipline is what you need to show up. And Ben, you've said this too about the most important thing is like walking through the door. And there are days where you just don't go all out, or there are days that you just don't have it. But if you show up, you're going to get better. And so it's just like one of those things where the discipline of showing up, and if there's a scale of effort 1 to 10, a 1's better than not being there at all. And so these are things that I've really kind of been working on. And when you talk about discipline, Patrick, that's kind of where I come from, where I'm at right now on my discipline journey is, and I like the way you're talking about it as this discipline diet, is how can you intentionally train it? And I do believe that you can train discipline the same way you can train muscles. It just takes different things. And that's where this whole thing that Ben and I have been talking a lot about, doing hard things, comes into play. Life is going to throw hard things at you, whether you like it or not, and you have no choice but to deal with them. And so I've been choosing to proactively choose things that are hard. But my filter for that is choosing things that either I want to do but haven't because there's some level of resistance in me around it, and things that I know if I do and I get to the other side, I'm going to feel good about that experience. It's going to help me get better mentally, physically, or emotionally. And also, Ben and I were talking about this just the other day around, like, I'm being thoughtful around those things because I don't want those things to be things that wreck me for an extended period of time physically. And so it's just like with the Boston Marathon, rowing a marathon, that was a really great example of something that sounded to me when I saw at the CrossFit Games years ago, I don't remember what year that was, when they're like rowing a marathon. I was just like, holy shit, that's like a long time on a rower. And I remember being at the games, being in the stadium when they started, leaving, going to lunch in Madison, hanging out, coming back, and they're still on the rower. And just be like, my God, like the mental challenge with that. But the thing that I realized is like with rowing, you can find a pace and you can kind of keep going. And so then John Marshall and I went to the CT&E setup on the marathon route, and I was surprised and really pleasantly surprised how many rowers were there. Like there were you had like 20 rowing machines set up in, and I was like, wow. Here I thought this was a hard thing, and there are a lot of people doing it. So this is like really, really cool. And then I started to realize through conversations that everybody was doing it in teams of like 3 or 4. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I got to stop talking to people. Otherwise I'm going to get in my own head and not do this. But I committed once I sat on the rower.
That's called a bait and switch, Marcus. We're going to do this thing. You want to join? Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the reason I brought that up is because it was way more of a mental challenge than anything else. The next morning, I was a little bit sore from it for sure. Like my hands, I did wear gloves and I wore like cycling shorts, but I was like sore from that. But within 24 hours, it wasn't that big of a deal. And so it didn't take away from my training going forward. I was able to kind of do, other things without having any sort of problem. As opposed to doing something, running a marathon, if it's your first one, could, knock you out for a while. So anyway.
Just to kind of frame up some of the hard things in the discipline, one of the things that Marcus did for fun, just to kind of like see if I could do it, for this idea of who will I become on the other side, what will I learn during the process, is he recently did also a 7-day fast. No food whatsoever for 7 days. I've done a number of 3-day fasts, and I can say they're challenging. They're really hard. They really, everyone that's ever, give it a shot and see what starts to tug at you physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so that's when I kind of was like, ooh, Marcus is operating a little different of a plane, this idea, which I love as well, is, he kind of teed it up like 3-day. Okay, but lots of people do 3 days. Maybe I'll do 5, but 5 is 5. Why not just do that? So, Marcus, you want to share a little bit of that experience, what that was like?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. So I've over the years I started with intermittent fasting and then I did like a 24-hour fast, and each one of those felt very hard. Like it seemed like going 24 hours without food when I had never done that seemed like a really big deal until I did it. And then it was not as hard of a thing. And then I did a 48-hour and a few 72 hours. It's something I'd always wanted to do, a longer extended fast. And for whatever reason, I hadn't done it. Right. So this is one of those hard things where I was like, I know I'm going to learn a lot about myself, about my body, and my mindset in this process. And what am I waiting for? And so once I had that thought, then I was like, okay, here we go. And I did a lot of research around it. So I knew exactly, I have this thing around knowledge versus wisdom. You can read about, what it's like to fast, or you can read a book on swimming, but until you jump in that cold water, you don't know how to swim. Right. And then you start to learn things in ways that only come through, actually doing something. So I researched a multi-day fast. When I went into it, I didn't know exactly how long I was going to go. I figured I wanted to get to, at least 5 days. And I thought that the time frame was kind of 5 to 10 days. But through my research, the number one thing I was worried about was losing muscle mass. Because for me, muscle mass, and it used to be a vanity thing. It's not so much a vanity thing now. I recognize the importance as it relates to longevity and all these things around strength and muscle mass. And I know how hard it can be to build these things up. So I was literally doing body scans every day. I had a continuous glucose monitor. I was tracking everything. I set up kind of what I was expecting on each day. And Amit, who's our friend who's a physician, I was texting him periodically saying, hey, is this okay? Is this okay? So I'm not encouraging anyone to do an extended multi-day fast just blindly. Like, it's some of these things you should walk before you run, and you should absolutely get some guidance along the way. But once I committed to it, I was like, all right, this is what I'm doing. And Ben, honestly, that's the first 3 days are the hardest. There's this really amazing thing that's happened for me in some of my 3 days fast, which is at the end of the 3 day fast, things start to change in a really cool way. But in this extended fast, my hunger went away in the afternoon of the third day, and that has to do with ghrelin levels lowering and all these things. And then inflammation. So I've had multiple knee surgeries, and I generally have aches and pains. And I realized the afternoon of the third day, those things went away as well. And there was a lot of science behind that around inflammation, and then there were all of these really interesting unlocks that happened for me each day. And from the evening of the third day until the seventh day, I had literally no hunger. But the habit of eating was the thing that kind of made me want to eat in the evenings whenever I would get home, but it wasn't actually hunger. And then it was, once I got to day 5, I was like, okay, that's a milestone. But then as I was going into day 6, I was like, day 6 doesn't seem to really, 6 days doesn't really doesn't sound right. So it's either,
I love that so much.
Yeah. And then I was like, so I got to go to 7, but the morning of the 6th day, my glucose was like low, like really low. It was like, I don't know, 50 or something like that. And so I was doing research around that. So I had like a teaspoon of olive oil that night, and started planning my re-entry to food, because that's also something you got to take very seriously if you've gone that amount of time without eating. Eating kind of healthy things, not a lot of fiber. But I will tell you, my first meal post-fast was 3 soft-boiled eggs, microgreens, some sea salt, and olive oil, and it was truly amazing. Truly amazing. So it's like there's your dopamine receptors, all these things kind of reset. So when you're reintroducing these things, it's just this really, really powerful kind of sensory overload. And the last thing I'll say on that is the morning of day 5, I was going to bed early. I woke up at like 3 a.m., eyes wide open, and all of a sudden my mind turned on like a supercomputer, and I was processing thoughts, emotions, literally got out of bed and just started writing and wrote for hours. It was a really, really cool and powerful experience. So it's something I'm going to integrate into kind of what I do going forward. So I'm going to do an extended fast in the 5 to 7 day range, probably once or twice a year.
I love that mindset of, well, what am I waiting for? I think that's such a cool story or question to be asking ourselves as we conceptualize these things. We talked about this a lot on the show, but there's the 2 U's, right? The 2 competing U's. The one that has the long-term focus, the long-term goals, is willing to make the hard, good decisions. And then there's the short-term one, which is the one that wants the pleasure and it wants the easy way. And I think that one of the big differences in discipline is the people that have the ability to lean into the longer term self and go, well, I know self 1 is over here going like, yeah, but like, let's wait and let's push it off. It's one that everyone listens to, like every diet starts on a Monday, right? It's like, no, yeah, I'm going to do that thing and like, I'm going to get ripped this summer. And it's like, but you keep on. But it's what you do, like, what am I waiting for? I think that's what a big part, if there's 2 things that I've kind of pulled out of this conversation so far, is the first one is like make those small decisions that set you up for the bigger decisions later on, or that you don't have to. Another one is like surround yourself with the right people, environment matters. And the next one is like stop listening to that other voice that's saying, yeah, and we'll do that later. And yep, that's a great idea. Let's do that when. Yep, let's right on and give yourself credit for something you haven't actually done yet. Stop trying to decide what better looks like, what a good man looks like. Just start being one right now. Yeah. This goes in like personal, family, relationships, business. We get really caught up in trying to make the right decisions, and we get this cycle of decisions when they don't count for anything until you actually take action. Like, I can't hear what you're saying because your actions speak so loudly. And I think that's what Marcus does so well. He's just like, listen, I don't need to keep debating this. I don't need to keep trying to figure this out, although he figures a lot and he does way more research and it's phenomenal. But like, let's just go. Let's do this thing and just take huge action. It's really cool.
Yeah. One of the things that was interesting on the fast side is that I have two daughters, 20 and 16. I was talking to my 16-year-old daughter, and they both had the same reaction. I didn't tell them what I was doing when I was doing it. Just after the fact, I was like, oh, and I debated telling them at all. But then I decided to, and they both had the same reaction, which was like a double take. And the first question was like, why would you do that? And just like confusion. And so I had this really great conversation with my 16-year-old daughter just around, because it was hard and I wanted to learn from it. And I said, do you think there's anyone on this planet who can tell me that I'm not disciplined when I just went 7 days without eating food? And in a real 16-year-old way, she shrugged. She's like, yeah, I guess that's a good point. Still kind of mocking it a little bit. But it was an important point that I did want to make to her, and to myself, which is, look, we all second guess ourselves. We all have momentary, moments where we're like, I didn't do this right or that right, or self-doubt, whatever it is. Like, there's, things don't go perfectly at all. And when you have the hard times and you get down, that's where you've got to have something to kind of lean on and prop you up. And so part of the reason for doing hard things for me is it's helped me change my identity. I am someone who does hard things. I am someone who can do hard things. And so I'm continuously thinking about things that sound hard to me, but I can do and then unlock something else. And that's not just physically, it's just also some of the things that are mental. I think the most powerful ones have a physical and a mental component to it. But another one that I've talked with Ben about is just letter writing. It's something that I've really, over the years, wanted to be someone who wrote letters, like handwritten letters. And for whatever reason, I haven't. Like, I'll send texts and emails and, things that are quick. And then I realize, hey, this is something I'm resisting, but I know if I do this, I'm going to feel a lot better about it. And there's a lot of research around the power of handwriting, reflection, slowing down, all of these things. And so started doing that. And it was a really, really eye-opening thing. And so I've tried to journal, like establish journal practices over the years, but since I kind of decided to do this letter writing, now I write, I journal. It's become so much easier for me. And just about everything I do now, I'm starting with writing either to myself about it or to someone else about it. And it's been a really, really powerful practice for me.
Marcus will write himself a letter to himself that he'll read in a week or two. Just be like, hey, this is like, and with crazy levels of intentionality to the point where he gets a certain type of really thick paper.
Yep.
And it almost feels like waxy almost.
Yeah, it's like stone paper. It's really, really cool. There's something very powerful about writing.
It's like almost like rubbery. It's
Yeah.
like almost feels like a rubber paper, and a pen that forces him to write very slow. It's very almost like the extreme example of like chiseling it in, right? It's not that, or like writing with calligraphy. And he works on his handwriting, so it's this very slow process to build this out. But the letter writing is anywhere from to yourself or to people that you've known that you don't know anymore. It's kind of this wide gamut that it's not just like, I'm going to write a letter to my mom, and then I'm going to write a letter to my grandma, and I'm going to write a letter to. It really opens up a lot of doors. Would you say that's right, Marcus?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things, and I kind of stumbled into some of the letter writing to myself because I was on a trip and I wrote a letter, and I was going to mail it to myself and read it a week later. And this straddled the week where I took my 16-year-old to get her learner's permit. And as I'm writing this letter, I was recognizing all of the things that I was going to be experiencing in the next week. And taking my daughter to get her learner's permit is like a big, big milestone. And there are all these things that were going on. And I realized, wow, it's only a week away. And when I read this letter, I'm going to have so much more insight into these things. And so it really became this powerful tool. When you think about intentionality and what you want, for your future self or whatever, like writing a letter and articulating that is in some ways speaking some of that into existence. And so it just like by being very, very thoughtful about it, it really kind of helped me unlock some things. And so I've written letters to just myself at various moments in time and in the future, and a letter for January 1st, 2026 that I'm going to read. It's been a really, really fun practice for me that's really helped me process a lot of things.
Let's pause to say thanks to a few sponsors, and we'll be right back to the conversation. We're sponsored this time around by our friends at Element, the science-backed electrolyte drink mix that's revolutionizing how health-conscious people think about hydration. Visit drinkelement.com/excellence to claim your free Element sample pack. Just got to cover shipping. Let's talk about intention, one of the core principles in our awareness, intention, action framework. When it comes to hydration, being intentional means choosing what actually works, not just what marketing tells you is healthy. Most sports drinks are loaded with sugar and artificial ingredients that work against your health goals. Element is different. It's purposely formulated with the optimal ratio sodium, potassium, and magnesium that your body needs, especially during fasting, keto, or intense training. It's become an essential part of our daily health practice, supporting everything from mental clarity to physical performance. You can experience the difference for yourself by getting a free sample pack at drinkelement.com/excellence. That's drink, the letters LMNT.com/excellence. Just got to cover shipping. We're sponsored this time around by Shopify, the commerce platform that gives entrepreneurs the freedom to chase what truly matters by handling all the technical complexities of running an online business. Start your journey today at shopify.com/excellence for just $1 per month. You know what we always say about health being freedom? Well, think of Shopify as that same kind of foundation for your business dreams. Just like we focus on controllable factors in our health journey, Shopify lets you control every aspect of your business through one intuitive dashboard. Their AI-powered tools handle everything from writing product descriptions to enhancing product photos, giving you the freedom to focus on your bigger mission. Their award-winning 24/7 support team ensures you're never alone on your entrepreneurial journey, because like any worthwhile pursuit, having the right support system matters. And just as we practice awareness, intention, and action in our daily lives, Shopify provides all the tools you need to be intentional about your business growth. Visit shopify.com/excellence and start your journey for just $1 per month. Shopify.com/excellence. Okay, now let's get back to the show. This has been great. This has been really cool. And this just makes me think that you're the right person to coach us through this idea of a disciplined diet, Marcus. So let's wrap up this conversation. We've got 6 I just think about them as sort of metaphors for a nutritional diet that we're going to take, that we all kind of have a good sense of in terms of the world of nutrition, and just lay them over this idea of discipline and this disciplined diet. Just put them out there and see what you think. And hopefully at the end of this, folks can, if they are similar to you, Marcus, in the sense of like, who do I want to be? What have I been waiting for? I want to be a more disciplined person. Hopefully we can give them a little bit of tangible advice as to how to think about implementing more consistent discipline into their lives in the way it seems like you have. So let's talk about quality, quantity, variety, consistency, and flexibility when it comes to our disciplined diet. The first one is going to be nutrient quality, or in our case, challenge quality. A healthy diet focuses on nutrient-dense foods. In a disciplined diet, this means choosing nutrient-dense challenges, tasks, and habits that require effort, foster growth, and stretch your comfort zones. These are the whole foods of character development: daily commitments, difficult conversations, regular workouts, or purposeful discomfort. So, Marcus, I would love to know what you think of as the whole foods of character development? What are nutrient dense challenges to you?
I think it's a great way of looking at it. And for me, it starts with kind of that definition of, what better is. Mm-hmm. And when you think about like the filter I use for doing hard things is that it's going to lead me to a better place. And most importantly, that starts with understanding where I want to go, right? So it's first of all, decide who you would be, right? Which is a deeply, deeply reflective question. But once you've decided that, and then the do what you must, then picking hard things to intentionally put you on that path and putting boulders in your way and for you to overcome. And that's where, for me, like the fasting, I knew on the other side of that, I was going to learn a lot about myself and it would take me further down the road to who I want to be. Same thing with like breath work and meditation. Even the rowing thing, it was mindset. I recognized that when I thought about it, it seemed like a really big deal. And I wanted to show myself it wasn't as big of a challenge as I thought it was. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And so once you decide who you want to be, then picking this nutrient dense kind of disciplined diet that moves you along that path and then intentionally doing those, I think is really, really important. And I think we make it into this in a moment, but like making sure that we're doing it in a balanced way, that we're not overloading ourselves with so many different things. Like to your point, one of the things you sent me was like having, and even too much of a good thing. So it's like finding the right balance around those things so that it's something that becomes sustainable.
Yep. Yeah, let's get into that because that is the next thing. So just as overeating, even healthy foods can be counterproductive, so too can overloading yourself with too many challenges that lead to burnout. A disciplined diet involves intentional portioning, regular manageable doses of difficulty that build strength without overwhelming us. How do you balance these things? Because it seems like, and in this conversation, it seems like you're doing all these things at once. I imagine this is over the course of years that you've thought about these things, you've played with these things, you've challenged yourself with these ideas. But how do you make sure that you're not biting off more than you can chew? How do you make sure that you're doing the right thing versus a bunch of different things?
So a lot of times I don't do that well. Sometimes I do, but it's one of the, after the fast, for example, I was so dialed in for those days. I mean, I literally every morning waking up, going to do an in-body scan, like it was all the stuff. And then when I finally kind of broke the fast, I just needed a full mental and emotional break from tracking, measuring any of those things. And historically, I'd struggled with allowing myself to do that. And so one of the things that I'm trying more and more to do is to give myself a break and to have grace with those things. Ben and I've talked about this around, the 30-minute, 1 hour and 2 hour track on CompTrain. And so I've been doing the 2 hour track, but then all of a sudden it got to a point where if I couldn't do the full 2 hour, I was feeling like I was letting myself down, which was like absurd, right? So it's just like, if I worked out for an hour, that's really, really great. But I would do that and somehow feel bad that I didn't do the full maximum amount. And so some of this stuff I lean into intentionally, like, okay, I'm not going to do that this week. And I'm going to let myself not be as dialed in. I'm going to give myself a break. It's one of the reasons I don't meditate every single day. Because if I set the expectation for myself to do it 7 days a week and I miss a day or two, I'm going to focus on that missed day or two. And I can say that about myself because that's the way I've done it historically. So when I put these things together and these goals together, they're directionally correct. And I very rarely tell myself I'm going to do something every single day. Because that for me is a formula for disappointment. And they say, happiness, the delta between expectations and reality. So I really try to pay attention to that.
Has there been a time when you tried to do too much or you did maybe over-index toward these challenges and perhaps what were the lessons from that?
Yeah, I mean, they always end in a bit of a train wreck around just too many things going on. And then I just like end up wasting more time at the end. And Ben and I were actually talking about this yesterday too, about doing going overboard with something. And this is why picking hard things that don't leave you sore for months, because at the end of the day, then you can't do the things that you want to be doing day in and day out. And so you can overtrain yourself to, reducing your VO2 max, reducing your strength, reducing your muscle mass. I trained for a half Ironman years ago, and I was less fit when I did the Ironman as when I started the training, despite spending all this time on a bike and running and swimming, because I didn't lift weights the same. I didn't, nutritionally, there were so many things that I was missing because I was focused on this kind of hyper-focused goal, and I lost sight of the big picture. And so whenever I lose sight of the big picture and go too far into something, I end up regretting it. Mm-hmm. And so this comes back to kind of who I want to be and what I consider better physically, mentally, and emotionally, and really leaning into and picking kind of the nutrient-dense diet in kind of moderation that leads me towards that.
Love that. Next one we've got is variety, balance, and diversity. A balanced diet includes a variety of food groups. A disciplined diet should also include a range of challenges, physical, mental, emotional, and social, to ensure well-rounded development. One of the things you've talked about here a couple of times is that physical, mental, emotional. What does it look like to make sure you weren't, and you even said this at the top, where like for a long time it was just that physical domain, but what does it look like to try to balance across all three of those things?
So for me, the big unlock on the mental side has been around, the breath work and meditation and doing hard things like cold plunge, or like little things that are very much around a decision point in making those. The biggest thing for me on the emotional side is just relationships and people. And it's just this amazing thing where there are times where I make it a point to say hi to as many people as I can. Mm-hmm. And it's really amazing in this world how many people just go around with their eyes down and not really wanting to make any sort of eye contact or emotional connection. But the moment you smile at someone sincerely and say hello, 9 times out of 10, they like explode back to you. And there's just like this really cool thing that happens with that. And I find the more that I do those things, the more that I'm starting to experience more and more people kind of giving me that energy as well. So there's subtle things around just the energy you put out into the world. When you're open to that, I think is a really, really powerful thing. And so the emotional side is something that I've really been experimenting with and unlocking and been amazed by as I've kind of learned and discovered more. Where is
the discipline in that pursuit?
It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
I dare you
yep.
the next time you go into a Starbucks to say hi to 10 people.
Yep.
Like it's people who aren't looking at you, right? Like to go up to a stranger and say, "Hi, I'm Patrick. How are you today?" It's not an easy thing. But the more you do that, the easier it gets. And you also recognize, I don't know what, at least for me, I don't want to bother people. I don't want them to think that I'm, being
selling them something
weird or any of those things. But more often than not, when you have those things and you experience the range of emotions, it crystallizes what's there, and then you recognize that there's really nothing to fear about it.
Yeah, I think that. Next one, avoiding junk food or limiting comfort behaviors. A food diet often limits junk food, empty calories that taste good but do little for health. In a disciplined diet, junk behaviors are those that provide immediate comfort or distraction, but undermine long-term growth, like mindless scrolling, procrastination, or avoidance of discomfort. I'm curious, perhaps maybe what are your guilty empty calories, Marcus? Because it does seem like perhaps you don't have any. I'm sure you do. But I would love to know maybe what you fight against when you're thinking about these sort of empty calories.
So I'll go strictly down the nutrition side, right? So my one thing I want to emphasize for me, one of the most important things and powerful things are habits. Mm-hmm. And so developing habits make these things easier. Right. So developing healthy habits, doing things that, Ben was talking about, doing things for your future self, doing things like leaving your clothes out, for the gym, having your coffee ready to go, like, the cup I'm literally looking at my coffee machine and my cup is right there. So tomorrow I can put it in. But doing these things to make it a lot easier for ourselves to reduce resistance and reduce the time it takes to make a good decision is really, really important. And so for me, one of the biggest things I do is if I go grocery shopping, I just don't buy junk food. But I have daughters that like, cookies and other things. And so sometimes they'll get these things. And then when they're on the counter, it is like, that's where I'm like, can't believe I just had all these cookies. And so it's like, if they weren't there, I wouldn't have them. And so for me, it's about creating a structure for myself where I have those moments of discipline where they matter the most, so I don't have to deal with them later. And then I, like most people, my willpower and discipline is like a sands through the hourglass, and it drains over the course of the day, and by the evening it's low. And so really making sure that I've got things set up so that I'm in a position to not make bad decisions around food and these other things in those moments. And so it's really trying to set up the habits and the structures and all these things to avoid a lot of that.
Yeah, that one feeds into our next one, which is consistency, which we have also talked about. The benefits of a diet come from what you do consistently, not occasionally. Similarly, building discipline is all about small, sustainable actions repeated over time, not occasional bursts of motivation. True discipline takes years to ingrain, not just weeks. I'd love for you to give us what your own definition, Marcus, is between motivation and discipline.
So for me, the discipline is my ability to do what I said I'm going to do. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to put the Cheetos in the cart. I'm not going to do those things. Motivation is the desire to create something going forward, create the version of myself. I can be motivated, but if I don't have the discipline to actually sit down, it doesn't really matter. And that kind of leads into the most important thing for me. That's the biggest unlock is literally, I think as James Clear talks about the 2-minute rule. It's just like literally force yourself to, if it's writing, sit down for 2 minutes. If it's, going to the gym and you don't want to, like putting on your shoes and walking out the door, do something that starts the action and commit to doing it for only 2 minutes. And at the end of the 2 minutes, if you're like, you know what, I don't want to do this, I'm going to stop, then okay, maybe that's the time to do it. But if what I find is 95 times out of 100 is once I sit down to do something, or once I put on my shoes and head to the car to go to the gym, it's just like momentum carries me. Same thing when ordering at a restaurant. All you don't need discipline throughout the meal. You need discipline when you're ordering. Could I have the side salad instead of the fries, please? And then if you do that, and then 2 minutes later, you're like, I really need those French fries, and you got to get up, go find your server and say, bring me those fries, then do that. Absolutely go ahead and do that. But more often than not, if you have that discipline for that moment, it's going to carry you in a way that could change your life. That's the thing. That's my belief.
Yep. All right. The last way we can think about a disciplined diet, like we do a nutrition diet, forgiveness and flexibility. No one eats perfectly all the time, and expecting perfection leads to failure. The same is true for a discipline. Occasional slip-ups are natural. What matters is returning to your diet after setbacks, embracing imperfection, and focusing on long-term consistency rather than short-term perfection. I think this is something Ben and I have talked about. We've talked about it as it relates to actual nutrition. We've talked about it as it relates to training, just this perfectionist mindset. Marcus, you're clearly a successful person. You've worked your butt off to do what you've done. I imagine you have perfectionist tendencies, and I imagine that they bleed into your pursuit of discipline. But I'm curious how you balance those things, that flexibility, that forgiveness, and the desire to be better and do better.
So for me, I have a really, really close friend who's kind of, preached to me about having grace with oneself, right? And that's this, you fall off the horse, don't get angry that you fell off the horse, just get back on it. And so if there's something that you plan to do that you don't do, it's okay to miss a day. Just don't miss 2, right? So it's just like, okay, well, hey, today didn't work out the way that I wanted, but if I miss a second day, then it starts to turn into another habit. And so for me, it's like I've been really working on giving myself kind of grace around that momentary slip or fall, and then really focus on getting back on the horse as quickly as possible and recognizing that that's a part of the process. And I'm constantly trying to develop habits that lead me to where I want to go. And part of that is like not developing habits that take me in the opposite direction. So I've been really working on the grace with myself if there's something that I miss, and recognize that that's a part of being human. Now let's not miss again.
Mm-hmm. All right. Last question to the both of you. If somebody out there was listening and said, cool, I want to put this idea of a disciplined diet into practice, where would you suggest they start? Let's just assume they're, we just call them average, where they're disciplined sometimes and fall apart sometimes, and always constantly going back and forth in that pendulum between really dialed in and disciplined and really loosey-goosey. Where do you begin, or where would you suggest somebody begin to build a more disciplined life?
So for me, it comes back to the concept of knowledge versus wisdom. So kind of once you decide who you want to be, you have to be brutally honest with yourself around where you are. And this is the approach that I've taken. And then build a plan on how you bridge those two things. And that's where knowledge, that's where listening to podcasts, that's where reading books, that's where mentorship and friends and conversations come into play to help put together that kind of formula or build that path. And then it's like, do what you got to do. It's start to implement. Because one of the things that I've spent a lot of time on is sometimes I can wildly overthink things and plan and plan and plan and not actually implement and not actually execute. And so for me, it's really about learning from the people. And this is where relationships come into play as well. Are you surrounded by people who build you up, or people who tell you can't do it? Because if you start talking to people about who you want to be and they think that's outlandish and they're like, you're never going to accomplish that, that takes a toll. So by talking with people who've done some of the things that you've done, or that you want to do, and learning from them to help build that knowledge, and then turning that knowledge into wisdom by execution, is really, really important. It's actually one of the things that I'm going to start doing more of, which is sharing some of these insights I've had along the way. Like, I don't consider myself an expert, on many things other than my own experiences. And so sharing some of my own experiences with doing hard things and what it was like for me related to the fast or some of these other things. And because I'm also very thorough around researching these things. So I'm starting to put together some of this stuff that I'm going to start putting out into the world. And I think I'm going to launch a newsletter here soon that's going to start sharing some of these things. And so it could also be a resource for people.
Love that. And we will definitely share that when you share it into the world. Ben, last word to you. Anything you want to wrap this conversation up with? Answer that question about how you'd suggest somebody start, or anything on your mind?
I think the biggest thing is, and Marcus said this a number of times throughout it, but is this, who do I want to become? And what we just want to recognize is that there is that internal battle, and we all have it. And what we want to do is to start to, let me backtrack. Let me give a little tangential story, which I've told before, which is this Cherokee warrior is talking to his old Cherokee, grandfather is talking to his grandson. And he says, there's two wolves that live inside of you. There's the wolf of fear and the wolf of courage. And the grandson goes, well, which one grows up and, wins? Which one is the one that's going to become the bigger one inside of me? He says, the one that you feed. It's the one you feed with your thoughts. I think the biggest thing to do with discipline is to set yourself up for easy wins. So you start to create some momentum. So you start to identify yourself as, I am the type of person that. So if you say, you listen to Marcus and you're super inspired by this, you're like, I'm going to do a 7-day fast. I wouldn't encourage that as step one if you haven't done all of the base work below it. Bigger to me is you're driving your car right now and you're listening to this and you go, okay, I'm going to start to build my discipline. Make a small promise to yourself that you can keep. When I get out of the car, I'm going to walk in through the door, put my bag down, and I'm going to do 5 push-ups. Then actually do that. And you go, I just did that thing I said I was going to do. Then you go, tomorrow, I'm not going to hit the snooze button. And then don't. And all of a sudden you got these like 2, and you go like, wow, I'm like saying I'm going to do these things and I'm following through with these things. That's what discipline is. It's what Marcus said. Motivation is like this excitement around. Discipline is actually doing, even when you don't want to. So say now, I'm not going to snooze tomorrow. Then tomorrow, when it goes off, you go, I don't want to. Go hit it. Opposite. Don't hit it. Get out of bed. Do the thing. So my take is stack small wins. Like just stack small wins upon small ones. When I get home, I'm going to hug my wife. Like, and do it. And like, even though you go in and she's on the phone and she's in a different type of mood and you know it's going to be a little bit awkward. Like you said you were going to do this thing, go do that thing. And just do things that are just on the, I think, again, James Clear, maybe the first thing to do is go read Atomic Habits. But the small thing is like, what's the minimal viable, right? What's the smallest little thing that you can do? Mm-hmm. Don't look for the big things. Marcus has talked about the 2-minute. Stack the small wins so that little voice inside of you that goes, I'm going to, starts to get a little braver, a little stronger, a little louder. And that other one that goes like, yeah, but let's wait till Monday, goes, no, I know what you're trying to do there. Right now, it's not a fair fight because the other one's way bigger. You got to start to feed the other guy and train the other guy so it can make him more of a fair fight.
So let me build on that real quick if we've got a couple more moments, because it's really probably one of the most important things is whatever's hard for you. It doesn't mean rowing a marathon. It doesn't mean doing an iron. None of that. It just means something that you're resisting that you know if you do, you're going to be better. And so there are 2 women on the team at NOBULL that are 2 awesome people. And I was talking with them about doing hard things and saying, what are some things that you think are hard? And one of them said, I've always wanted to do a pull-up, but I'm not someone who can do a pull-up. Or I'm not strong enough to do a pull-up. And I was like, not yet. But like, I guarantee you, if you want to do a pull-up and you show up every day working on it, you'll absolutely be able to do a pull-up. And so the 2 of them got together and started 3 or 4 days a week, spending 15 minutes working on pull-ups. And there have been times where I've walked by the rig in the office and I see them there, literally sometimes with other people. They're now bringing people over to show them how to do an assisted pull-up and do all of these things. And it's now a thing where it's like, the one who said, I'm not someone who can do a pull-up, I'm not strong enough to do a pull-up, she's now like, I absolutely am going to be able to do one, and seeing that. And so there's something that happens there. It's a change in identity around what you can and what you can't be. And whichever one you tell yourself, you're going to be right. And so it may be like for rowing, maybe you never rowed before. So you just want to row 1,000 meters, 500 meters. It doesn't matter what it is. I've got a really good friend who's trying to get back in shape. He's an entrepreneur and has just been, dedicated to everything but himself. And so the thing I told him was like, get a kettlebell and put it in your home office. Mm-hmm. And every single time you walk in or out of your office, I want you to pick it up. Don't do a kettlebell swing. Don't do anything. Just pick it up. Because I want you to be someone who picks up a kettlebell, who feels the weight of the kettlebell, feels the metal in your hands. And then it's going to be do a kettlebell swing, and do 5. But keep it kind of limited. And then that's where the discipline and consistency comes into play. And identity is that he has become someone who does kettlebell swings. And it's an unlock there, because if you're someone who does kettlebell swings, you're also somebody, it's not a big leap to being someone who works out more regularly, takes care of themselves, eats more health, like makes healthier decisions, all of those things. And so I think there's this power, maybe we have another chat around this at some point, around identity and how we can unlock identity through some of these, acts of discipline or the discipline diet.
Love that.
What we all heard there was that there's a rig in your office. Everyone's like,
in a cold plunge.
Yeah.
So Ben, there's a rig in your office too. It's called a gym. So don't go.
Multiple rigs. Multiple rigs.
But I
like
work in a
jealous.
gym. He works in like a big office. Yeah.
That's true. Marcus, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I don't know why
This
we
is
waited
awesome, guys.
so long to have you back, but I'm glad we did, and we will again very, very soon. So thank you. Thank you very much for tuning into the show. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening or watching so you do not miss another episode. For more frameworks and daily practices, visit chasingexcellence.email. And don't forget to tap the link in the show notes for today's full listener guide, where we break down the key ideas and provide actionable steps to help you put them into practice. Until next time, keep building health, finding freedom, and living with your heart on fire.